All right, welcome to the roast along video for the Fresh Roast 540 and 800 without the extension tube. So if you got the unit, you did not get the extension tube, this is the video for you. It's helpful to watch both of them, honestly, but this is the one that goes for your roaster because they'll roast very similarly with the standard chamber as opposed to the extension tube.
Right.
So we're going to get into it.
Yep. So I love the 540 because it's great to start off when you're roasting because you're just using 4 ounces. So in the sample pack that you got, you have 5 half-pounds of coffee, which means you have 10 roasts that you can do, which gives you a lot of wiggle room to figure out how it works, what you like. So
well, 12 with the roast along pick
right.
as well. So
that's true.
Yeah.
We're going to roast the Colombia Don Enrique today. My name is Catherine Mansell. I am the director of Current Crop Roasting Shop in New Orleans.
And I'm Stephen Burnett. I'm with Coffee Bean Corral. I do the marketing and I do coffee roasting and stuff like that. I just love roasting. So.
Well, we chose to focus on the Colombia Don Enrique because it's a fan favorite in New Orleans and in Jackson. Most all the employees and the folks that are buying this coffee from us love it year after year.
If you've had it before, you know what we're talking about. If you haven't, you're about to know what we're talking about.
Right.
So very cool. Well, we came up with 10 commandments of roasting and for this coffee roaster, and so we're going to go through those now. This will help you set everything up, make sure that your area is good, the roaster's good, your power considerations are in place, and everything's ready to go so that when we press start on this roaster and roast together, you'll be right along with us.
Right.
Okay, so what's number 1?
Number 1 is roast in a well-ventilated area. So depending on how light or how dark you roast is going to determine the amount of smoke that's going to come off this roaster. But no matter which roast level you're going with, you want to have a vent hood to take in some of that smoke. If you don't have a vent hood and you're roasting inside, your alarms will definitely go off. So if you don't have a vent hood, try to get right next to a window with a fan blowing out of it or roast inside your garage as long as the temperature's not too hot or cold.
That's it. Number 2 is everything is hot. Everything on this roaster is hot. Now, you've got this in your hands right now, so you know this is not a thin plastic. This is a composite lid. It holds heat very well. It's heat resistant. It won't melt, but it holds heat very well too. The actual roast base will get hot as well. Everything is hot. The chamber gets hot. Everything is hot, and it can burn you. It really can. So be mindful of that. Be careful of that, and make sure you don't have anything flammable right around this roaster.
Right. The only thing that's not going to get hot is this handle right here. So everything else is going to be very hot. Keep that in mind. Let's see. Run the whole cool down phase.
Right.
So once the time runs out on this roaster, and we'll show you in a second how the time's going to count down. When the time runs out on the roaster, a C3 is going to pop up. It's going to pump in 3 minutes, pump in cool air for 3 full minutes. You want to run that cycle even if you have a separate cooling tray. It'll help you increase how long you'll have this roaster in full working order.
Absolutely. Run that cool down sequence. Number 4 is don't use an extension cord. I know I like to roast outside, and sometimes people want to use an extension cord to get the roasting right where they want to roast, in the exact right spot. Maybe there's not an outlet right there in the ideal place. But if you use an extension cord, you lose power to the unit. Not enough voltage gets to the unit to heat up the heating element and to roast your coffee thoroughly. And so that's when people call and say, hey, the roaster's not producing enough heat. Well, one of the reasons for that is oftentimes they're using an extension cord or a power strip, something like that, that can actually cause the roaster to not perform as it should. So wherever you set up, be sure you can plug directly into a wall outlet, and that way you'll ensure you get the proper voltage to this unit for it to function.
Right. Number 5 is roast above 55 degrees. So any extreme temperatures, whether it's extreme heat or extreme cold, will negatively affect the roaster. So you'll notice if it's really, really cold and you're roasting outside, that it's taking quite a bit longer to achieve the first crack or whichever roast level that you're going to, and that's because the temperature affects the roaster. Any extreme heats, and you'll find it roast a little bit too quickly.
That's right. Now, in our other video of the fresh roast with the extension tube, you'll see that extension tube, and you can see it's kind of double wall insulated the way it's built. That one can do a little bit more, but honestly, if it's under 55, it's really hard to get that roast degree that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, be mindful of the little ones. That's number 6. Be mindful of the little ones. Like we said, everything is hot. The chamber is glass. This is a little bit, it's not quite as top heavy as the extension tube model, but it's a little top heavy, and little ones like to get very curious. And so be very careful with this. Make sure there's no kids or grandkids running around. We don't want anyone to get hurt, especially. And so be careful with that. Even after cool down, there's still some heat retained in this system. So make sure that the little ones are clear.
Yeah. Always make sure you clean out the chaff. So this top part is a chaff collector, and it comes off into 2 pieces. So as you're roasting, since this is an air roaster, the air is pushing up and moving all the beans around, but it's also pushing the chaff all the way up through the center circle, and it settles here in the chaff collector. After every single roast with a fresh roast, make sure that you dump this out and clean off this mesh right here. I use a little paintbrush, and it clears everything out. Just make sure that that's cleared out after every single roast. If it's backed up, your roaster will get too hot and your beans will roast too quick.
And sometimes, especially with natural processed coffees that produce more chaff, that can even clog up while you're roasting.
Right.
So you may have to reduce the size of your roast, your initial charge weight, in order to make sure that the chaff collector does not clog up.
Right.
Okay. So then roast in a clean and non-cluttered area. Now we're breaking that rule here. We've got microphone, sound equipment, cables, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But ideally, and you should roast in an area where it's just you, the roaster, and your notebook, maybe a timer or something like that. But you want to be able to move around. You don't want to be holding the hot roaster with your hot hands and not be able to put it down anywhere.
Right.
You want to have a clear area that's safe to have everything. And that way, it's going to make your experience a lot easier, a lot more simple, and a lot less frustrating.
Right. Next one down on the list is lower the fan. So these beans in this roaster, they need to be agitated. So you're going to need to lower the fan. I've seen a lot of people go low and slow on some of these roasters where they're not adjusting their fan at all. Your beans are not going to hit the temperature they need to develop to where you can taste those positive attributes in the beans if you don't adjust the fan.
And if you're roasting max capacity like we do, we start with the highest fan setting there is,
Yeah.
and we wind up about halfway, halfway down the fan setting, because if you don't lower, you don't raise the temperature.
That's right.
And finally, record your roast. We'll show you a way of doing that, but basically, if you record the details, time, temperature, and events of your roast, then you'll be able to repeat it when you get a really solid roast. When you get something, you taste it, and it's like, man, this is amazing. You'll have the notes on how you did it. You'll be able to repeat it again. I've done it. You've done it. We've all done it, where you don't expect it. You grind that coffee, take a sip of it, it knocks your socks off, and you have
It's
no
perfect.
idea which roast was that, how did I do that, what settings?
Right.
Record your roast, and
Right.
we'll show you how to do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the 10 commandments of roasting. Now, if this is the first time you've used this roaster, you definitely want to do what's called a dry roast or a dry run with it. So
Yeah.
talk us through that, Catherine.
So a brand new roast, a brand new piece of equipment, a roaster like this, you need to go ahead and do a dry run on it. So you want to burn off all of the excess that's left on by the manufacturer. So you want to do a dry run for a good solid 5 or 6 minutes on this roaster, just to burn all of that excess out.
So that's running hot with nothing in it.
Right.
Or if you have some cheap coffee seasoning beans that you want to run in there, that's fine. But you don't want to drink the coffee from
Right.
those beans after the fact.
Yeah.
The idea here is to burn off all that stuff that is produced in the manufacturing. So if you haven't done that yet, don't continue and do this roast until you've done that, because otherwise the beans will come out a little funky. You don't want that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, very good. So we're going to set up here. So we've got everything where it's at. If you follow the 10 commandments of roasting, you're in your spot, ready to go. We'll go to the next phase here. So we'll come back in just a second so you can get settled in.
Welcome back. If you have everything ready and you're set up and ready to go, I'm going to go over the parts of the roaster. So I already spoke about the chaff collector, which comes off into 2 pieces. It's a little wonky the first time you take off the chaff collector. Most people take it off just like this. It's got 2 parts to it, so make sure you have your towel take off both of the parts. So that's your chaff collector and top. This part right here is your roasting chamber. So remember, the actual chamber itself is going to get hot. This handle will not get hot. This bottom silver part can actually unscrew. It's easy to clean when you do it that way. Just make sure that it's screwed in firmly when you go to start your roast. The bottom part is your base, and the base shows your panel, which has all of the numbers on it that we'll go over here in a minute.
Now you have everything you need with just this roaster, but a couple things that we think are really helpful and useful in these roasts are a couple of accessories. Number one being an external outside timer.
Right.
The timer on this unit is a countdown timer, so it will count down, and it's fine, it works, but when you're trying to record the events of the roast, you don't want to do math. Right. I don't want to be doing math. I want to just look at this big display and see where I'm at and say, okay, at a minute and 30, at 5 minutes 40, this happened.
Right.
And an external timer will help you with that considerably, especially if you have to go back and add time. If you initially undershot, beans need longer than you think, you don't want to add time here and then forget how long it was. So if you got an outside timer, you know how long it was.
Yeah.
Number two is, and you got one of these with your roaster, a notebook, okay? And I always record the roast in a notebook similar to this. I'll show you, should have a larger image of that, but I just record down the side here, 0 through 12. If you're going to go darker, you might add some more minutes. These are minutes. At the 0 minute, that's before we start my initial conditions. We're going to go over this in a second. Fan at 9, power at 4, temperature is room temperature, so I didn't even record it, and then any events that take place. And then as we go minute by minute, if I make a change, I record that change alongside that minute. I record the temperature, which I'll show you how to do in a second, and I record when events happen, like yellowing, Maillard reaction, browning, first crack, second crack, that kind of thing, record under the events. And this way you'll be able to know exactly how you made this coffee. Always record your roasts.
Yeah.
And finally, this is super optional, but it's super fun also, is an external cooling tray. We've got this one here that we sell. Coffee Bean Corral and Current Crop both sell it. It's the dual basket bean cooler, and it's got 2 chambers in it. This one is a coarse mesh and a fine mesh, and the coarse sits on top of the fine mesh. And then there's a fan in the base right here, same kind of fan they use in CPUs. It really moves quick, moves a lot of air quickly, and it sucks air through the coffee in this top chamber. Now, why the 2 baskets? Well, the top basket is this coarse mesh, and it allows any excess chaff, broken pieces of coffee, what have you, to be pulled through this mesh into the fine mesh basket so that you're sifting and cooling at the same time, and it'll cool it really quick. Under
Very
a minute,
quick.
from like 450, 500 degrees, under a minute, it's like cool to the touch.
Right.
It's pretty amazing.
Right.
So we like that, and it's really useful. It's like, why do you need that? Well, it's useful because instead of having to enter cooling mode in the unit here and then kind of hit cooling before you want to get to your before you get to your temperature you want to see, or the roast level you want to see, you can hit cooling mode, dump the beans right in here, and it immediately stops roasting that coffee. It arrests the roasting process. So you know that the color you see in the chamber is the color you're going to wind up with.
Right.
If you use cooling mode on here, you have to press cool a little ahead of when you would want to cool it. And so for this one, we're just going to use the built-in cooler in here. For the other, if you want to see this in action, we're going to use this in the extension 2 video that we're going to show. So you can fast forward that video to see that. Yeah. Okay, now let's talk coffee.
So we chose the Colombia Don Enrique, and we've done that with every roaster video this week because the Don Enrique is a fan favorite. Yeah. The cupping notes are chocolate and cherry, and it's got a long, sweet finish on it. The beans also plump up really big, so they're really nice. When you nail the roast, you'll see how big and beautiful they are. Yeah. So definitely a good one, a very easy roaster. So something that's not going to give you too much trouble on your first roast right out of the gate.
There we go. So I think if you've got everything set up, if you're where you need to be, you're in a safe environment, well ventilated, all that stuff, you're ready to go. We'll load it up.
Yeah. All
right. So if not, pause the video now and go take care of that.
Yeah.
So we have a 1/4 pound, 4 ounces of the Don Enrique. That means that you need to use half of the sample bag that we've sent you, that's marked roast along video.
And what's included in the box of the fresh roast, you'll see this small little cup, and it's a 1 ounce cup. So if you don't have a scale and you need to break up that 1/2 pound into 4 ounces each, that clear cup is 1 ounce. So you can scoop 4 ounces.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the coffee loaded in there, and now we need to set the initial conditions here.
Sure. So the panel, when you first turn your roaster on, if you've never used it before, those settings are meant to be changed. So the first number is your fan setting, and we want that up as high as it can go. It could go from 1 all the way to 9, but we're going to start it off on 9. So I'm going to tap that knob and move it all the way up to 9. toggling over, which is just pressing that knob all the way down, goes to your power setting in the middle. That's your heat setting.
The one that's flashing is the one that's going to change.
Right, yeah. So it could go from 1 to 9, but we're going to start it off right at 4. So we're going to toggle over to the timer, and you can see that it's blinking, and we are going to turn it all the way up to 12. So we're going to start off these settings on the 540 without the extension tube, and hit the run cool button to start. You ready?
Well, yeah, and it's run cool because you hit run cool to start and run cool to cool. So
Right.
when we get done,
Yeah.
we'll press that button as well. But I'm ready if you are. Okay.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, roast. Oh, let's see here. We're going to be a couple of seconds behind because
Perfect.
I forgot my job.
Yeah.
All right.
And as you can see, the beans are bubbling up. They're moving around. So in the other video with the extension tube, you'll see the beans take up the entire amount of space. So they're not going to take up the entire amount of space at first on this one. Beans are raw beans are really dense. They're really heavy. So at the beginning of the roast, they're really just going to start bouncing around a little bit. And as we get further into the roast and they expand, you'll see them moving around and using a lot more space.
Someone described this as like a low boil with
Yeah.
without the extension tube. And if
Yeah.
you have one, it's just throwing the coffee around. And there are pros and cons to both.
Sure, yeah.
There are pros and cons to both for sure.
Yeah.
But what we want to see for sure is the coffee moving. If you overload it, if you put too much weight in there, when you start this up, the fan's all the way up and you hear it, but nothing's moving.
Right.
And if that's the case, of course, the coffee on the bottom is getting a lot more heat and absorbing a lot more heat than the coffee on the top because
Right.
they're not rotating.
Yes.
And so you want to make sure the coffee is moving just like this so that you get that good rotation. Now, as the coffee continues to roast, it'll lose weight. So this airflow it's got right now will start moving the coffee around even more and even
Right.
more. And then we can afford to lower that fan, thus increasing the temperature in the chamber so we can arrive at the roasting temperatures we're looking for.
Yeah. So what we're doing now, we're waiting a full 2 minutes from when we hit that first run cool all the way until the timer gets down to 10, and then we're going to toggle over and lower the fan setting. So without the extension tube, you are lowering the fan setting and increasing the temperature setting or increasing the power setting throughout the roast to get you to your optimal temperature.
Okay. We're a couple seconds behind on this timer here, but we're almost ready.
So I'm going to tap the knob, tap it one more time, and lower it to 8.
Now, while the roaster is running, go ahead and lower yours to 8 if you haven't done that. While the roaster is running, when you tap the knob here, whichever is selected will blink like 3 times, and then it goes solid again.
Yeah.
That way it allows you to switch between, you don't have to do anything to turn off that setting. I can hit that, and now it's toggle over to power, toggle over to time, toggle back around.
Right.
And if I want to check the temperature, here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to wait for it to stop blinking, so all these are solid, and then I'm going to swipe clockwise quickly.
Yeah.
Now when you do that, it shows you the temperature of the air going into the chamber. You see we're at 330 degrees Fahrenheit right now. People will say, that's not hot enough to roast coffee. We know. Fresh Roast knows.
Yeah.
Trust the process. We'll get
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to my main menu here and get ready to make the next change.
Yeah. So now it's at 9.0. We're going to lower the fan to 7. And now on the in-between, when that time hits 8.5, I'm going to toggle over to the power setting and increase it to 5. And you can already see the beans sort of fading out from that seed-like color. They're starting to get a light pale yellow. They'll get into a darker yellow, start to get into tans and browns. And then you're going to hear them pop like popcorn.
Yeah, which is the fun part. That's called first crack. If you've roasted before, you know what it's like. It's a great moment in every roast, and it's a major milestone in the roast.
Yeah.
Until first crack, you really don't have coffee. But once I've drank coffee that was pulled before first crack. It's not great. Once you hit first crack, then you get into those very, very light, those cinnamon roasts and beyond.
Right.
In first crack, the same concept as popcorn. The moisture inside the bean swells and expands, and it causes the bean to fracture.
That's
And
right.
when that happens, are we going to make our change now?
We are. Now the time's at 8, so I'm going to go and decrease the fan setting again to 6.
Okay, so your setting should be 6 for fan, 5 for power right now.
That's right.
Okay, see the coffee's still moving, but because it's lost weight, we've been able to lower the fan 3 full points and keep that coffee moving about as much as it was when we first started.
You want those beans to get agitated. The best way to roast coffee is to make sure those beans stay agitated throughout the whole roast.
And they definitely look like they're increasing in size already.
Yeah. So now we're at 7.5, so I'm going to increase that power to 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
6 is where we have it set right now.
Yeah.
Now, while you're roasting, go ahead and note some of the smells you're smelling out of that. Some kind of bread-like, like yeast or breaking bread. You'll smell some of that as we roast this coffee.
Yeah.
And the smell changes as you go. I know some people that have been roasting for years and years can tell you what's happening, what stage the coffee's in just by smelling it.
That's right.
There's a lot of information available to our senses.
Yeah. All right. 7 minutes. I'm going to lower the fan to 5.
Okay. And we still have agitation. If you see no agitation in your bed right now, increase it 1. So we have some movement. You should all have some movement, but just in case.
Yeah.
And that's something else we should say is that sometimes an individual house power service may not be putting as much voltage through as somewhere else. Sometimes even different times of day, your power service can fluctuate.
Right.
If you notice your coffee's not roasting as expected, it may be that your grid, your home or your wherever your roasting is on, is kind of have a lot of demand on it at that moment.
Yeah.
We have a voltage meter that we sell as part of a roaster's kit with some other things that are good accessories so that you can keep note of that and track it. It's kind of an advanced move, but it also will help you diagnose certain issues.
Right. All right. 6.0 on the time. Gonna lower the fan one more time. And then at 5.5, I'm going to increase the power one more time. So comparatively, when you have a fresh roast without an extension tube and a fresh roast with an extension tube, the one that we're using now, you're lowering the fan and increasing the power to hit that target temperature. And with the roaster with the extension tube, the fan setting is really going to control most of the heat. So if you're going for a medium roast or darker, you'll just be lowering the fan in the video with the extension tube. This one, we're both playing each other up to where we can hit our primary temperature.
That's right. You'll find if you do any Googling, now you may have received this as a gift and didn't even know it was coming. Okay, so that's one reason we made this, so people would know what to do. What do I do with this? Well, now you know. But if you've done a lot of research on these things and looked around, you'll see a lot of varying information about how to start your settings. I think some people say start heat low and go high. Some people say start heat high and go low. You're going to figure out your own way of doing it. This is how we do it, and this is how we do it every day just like this. So.
Benefits of home roasting is, one primary benefit is you roast the coffee how you want to roast the coffee. Anybody around can give you a guide on what they think is best, but that may not be the way that you like that coffee roasted. So you get to play around and do whatever you like with your beans. This way, what we're showing you here is to show you how to get a nice light medium roast on the Don Enrique.
It's a great roast degree for that. Now I just heard a pop. I don't know if you heard that on the microphones or not.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
So we're in first crack now. It's okay if you're not quite there yet. You should be there any second. And first crack, the very first pop of first crack is not what we mean when we say first crack.
Right.
First crack is a reaction in the bean that takes place in every coffee bean, ideally every coffee bean in the batch. If you want an even roast, it definitely should.
Right.
So as we hear it become more and more, they were popping at the same time. It's getting a little bit more vigorous. And that's the same reaction that we talked about earlier where the moisture inside expands and fractures the bean. Now we have coffee. Now to get the roast we want, we're going to let it go a little farther and kind of keep an eye on it. But if you want to roast it really light, you could pull it now. You can enter cooling mode right now. Just press that start cool, that run cool button, and that would start cooling the beans right now if you want a very light roast. If you want to go a dark roast, you would want to wait a little longer than what we do. We're going to pull it for like a light medium. So it's right now we've got everything set up. The roast has been going 8 minutes and 40 seconds, so we've got a solid roast, a good time to hit first crack. And you can pretty much pull it whenever you want, whenever it's where you want. But keep in mind, if you don't use an external cooler, it will be darker than where it is when you press run cool. So if you press run cool and it's this dark, it's going to be about that dark by the time the cooling sequence is over with. So you want to press run cool before it gets a little bit before it gets where you want it to be.
Right, and that all comes with trial and error.
Yes.
All
It's looking beautiful.
It is looking good. Yeah.
Okay, so we're at 415. Okay.
So right at 2.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 2.5.
So we've got 2.5 left on the timer on the panel of the roaster. So I'm going to hit the run cool button.
There you go.
You'll see the C3 pop up right underneath the timer. So what I like to do is I like to lower the power setting all the way down to 1. Now it's not pumping in heat, but I always try to do as much as I can to cool it down as quickly as I can. So I move the power all the way down to 1. Toggle over to the fan and blow them around a little bit more. Try to cool them down as quickly as you can.
Here we go.
When you're first learning how to roast coffee, you're using your ears, you're using your eyes, you're using your nose. So you have to figure out what works. When you're listening to those cracks, sometimes you go, oh, is that it? Should I stop here? Oh, wait, I should have stopped earlier.
Yeah.
So all of that trial and error is going to come as you roast. The outside cooling tray is really beneficial if you are nailing a roast. Right when you see something, you go, oh, that's that first crack. That's exactly where I want it to stop. With an outside cooler, you can hit your run cool and dump your beans out right then, and it'll stop it exactly where you want it to go.
That's right. It's looking beautiful. Now, the main thing with this is, and this is one reason we did this video series, if you set up the roast well, we hit first crack around 8 minutes, right around there. Yeah. If you set up the roast well, it's going to be good unless you set fire to it, basically. Unless you turn it into charcoal, it's going to be good. When I first started roasting, my first few roasts, I was done in like 3 minutes. Start to finish, 3 minutes. That was not good coffee.
Not good coffee.
Because the chemical reactions that take place in the bean that cause the flavors to emerge didn't have time to react. Didn't have time to do their thing. So whatever you do now, this will be drinkable. This will be good coffee.
Definitely.
And that's what we wanted to do for you guys.
Yeah. Can't go wrong with the Colombia Don Enrique.
No, you can't. Something to consider. She turned the fan up a little bit because the agitation was stalling out. But you don't want to just crank it up to 9.
Right.
Because if you crank it up to 9, it may blow this much lighter weight coffee up into the chaff collector.
Right.
So then the coffee in the chamber is still getting cooled evenly.
Yeah.
The coffee sitting in the bottom of the chaff collector isn't getting cooled nearly as quickly, and so it's going to be an uneven roast.
That's right.
So you want to make sure you turn it up so that it cools it faster, but only so much that it keeps the coffee moving, not so that it's throwing the coffee around. That's especially a problem with the extension tube.
Yeah.
Because the extension tube can just launch that roasted coffee up into the chamber,
Yeah,
and you dump out half your roast is in the chaff collector. Not what you want. Not what you want.
Yeah. Almost finished here.
If you come from drum roasting or other styles of roasting, this is a much faster means of roasting coffee than some other ones are. So, yeah, 12 minutes and 27 seconds is done from pressing start to being finished. Let's look at that coffee here. Ooh. It's nice and even. We nailed it. The roast degree on that. Love that. Okay, so yours should look something like that. That is going to be a delicious cup of coffee. We recommend waiting a couple of days.
Right.
About 72 hours, I think, is what they recommend. Yeah. For this coffee to breathe, degas, you've got some valve bags in your kit. You've got, and I would recommend putting the coffee in that, let them degas in that bag, and then after a couple days, you'll be able to grind this up, brew it, and it's going to be awesome. So thank you so much for roasting along with us today. I hope this was helpful and informative. We do have a New Year's live stream event coming up on the 3rd of January. So get ready for that. We'll send you an email about that with a link. If you have questions, you do a couple more roasts, you're like, why is it this way? What can I do here? How can I make some? Whatever. Just ask us the questions. If we know, we'll tell you the answer. If we don't know, we'll go, we don't know. So that's what we promise right now.
Sure.
But thank you so much for roasting along with us. Again, I'm Stephen Burnett with Coffee Bean Corral.
Catherine Mansell with Current Crop Roasting Shop.
Y'all have a great day. Happy roasting.
Happy roasting.